What's up? Welcome to Updates with Mr. Warford. This is the last bit of information you're going to get for Unit 4 in World History, Age of Absolutism. So this time frame, around 1550 to 1800, we've talked about Spain, France, England, a little bit about Russia, but one thing that we haven't talked about that we're going to touch on very briefly, what else was going on in Europe during this general time frame that is shaping the Age of Absolutism? And it's called the 30 Years' War. Okay, earlier this year we talked about this thing called the Holy Roman Empire. So this area that nowadays would be considered, a big chunk of it would be considered like modern day Germany. This area was not just one sovereign state or one sovereign country. It was an empire that had several different states and ruling families and princes within it. Was the Holy Roman Empire. We discussed that earlier in the year in the Reformation unit. So in the Holy Roman Empire, within it, some of these small sovereign places end up butting heads over this idea of Catholicism versus Protestantism, and it becomes less about religion and more about which groups are going to govern Europe. So there's a religious aspect that started it, and it becomes political as we go through. So more than 8 million people are going to become casualties resulting from battles, famine, looting and pillaging and disease. And not only is the Holy Roman Empire going to be encapsulated in this war, but it's also going to involve the empires of France and Spain. So in 1648, we get this thing called the Peace of Westphalia. So after this very bloody, one of the bloodiest wars in world history, we finally get, everybody's like, enough of the fighting, we've got to sit down at the table, and all these different leaders need to hash out a plan. So what happens? France comes out winning in this situation because they get new German territory. Okay, they extend their territory. German lands are divided into more than 300 different states, and they are going to, this is how it's going to change, they're going to be independent of the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Empire still exists after the 30 Years' War, but it's going to be severely fragmented in the land that we now know as Germany. So as you can see here, you can see it's very fragmented in this area. And it's going to end religious wars in Europe. So this lofty idea that some rulers had that we would one day have a kingdom that was just Catholic or just Protestant, that's going to go out the window. And we're not going to see wars based on religion like we had in the Reformation unit in the Age of Exploration when we talked about it, and after this. So with that comes the rise of what's called a nation state. Okay, this is where you have established boundaries for your country, and you decree that the residents of that state are subject to the laws of that state and to no other institution, whether that's secular or religious. So kind of going back into no more religious wars, we see a lessening of power in this whole idea of having an entire kingdom made up of a certain religion, and it's going to lessen the power of the Pope in the Catholic Church. So shifting gears back into Russia. Okay, so Peter the Great has died. The people that replace him, there's a few rulers that are really not much to write home about. Then a guy takes power named Peter the Third. He's also Tsar Peter the Third, not really much to write home about. And his wife, Catherine, becomes ruler of Russia. Now, how did she do it? There is debate. So historians are not sure on whether she conspired against him, because there's evidence that he was planning on divorcing her and she didn't want to lose power, so she conspired against him to overthrow him. There's also evidence that just members of the Russian government wanted to remove him because he was a bad ruler. So either way, he dies at the age of 34 in the mid-1700s, and some people believe he was assassinated. Others don't. We may never know. But either way, Catherine becomes the head, the monarch of Russia. So she continued to bring more Western influence into Russia. She expands the southern border of Russia and gets that warm water port that Peter the Great could never get by successfully battling the Ottomans. And they acquire new territory from Poland. She was very popular for her foreign policy, and that's where she got the nickname Catherine the Great, just like Peter the Great before her. But just like Peter the Great, there was a dark side to Catherine the Great. Catherine was an absolute monarch, often ruling very ruthlessly. So she exempted Russian nobles, so like the nobility, the upper class, from paying taxes. And peasants started to rebel against the terrible living conditions that they had, and she crushed them, killed a lot of them that tried to go against the government. And this thing called serfdom was very popular then, where peasants would essentially, they'd work on a plot of land for somebody of the upper class in exchange for being able to farm for their own food and to have safety on that land and not be attacked by other people. And it was a very hard way to live, very living hand to mouth. It was not really a way to get rich, and you were often living in squalor. So as a result of the upping of more people being involved in serfdom and her crushing the rebellion of the peasants, there's more and more peasants in Russia. And the common people have less rights than any other place in Europe. So in Russia, not a good place to be a peasant or a serf. So as we see Catherine the Great's reign come to an end, by the time she dies in 1796, she is the last of the great absolute monarchs in the 1700s. So new ideas about government, liberty, equality were spreading through Europe. For instance, that idea of the nation state, like I just talked about with after the 30 Years' War. So these are going to challenge the institution of monarchy and of this idea of absolute rule and divine right. So that wraps up Unit 4, and I need you to make sure that you're working on that study guide and reviewing for your test. Have a great day. Bye.